Hello, Night Nation. I'm Trylko from the Sons of UCF, joined by Eric Lopez of the Black and Gold Banneret. Welcome to Around the Kingdom. Elo, hello.
Trace, welcome. Welcome to the frostiest and fastest UCF show around. Coming up on this edition. Hey, you know what's cold right now? It's UCF basketball defense. Ooh, rough one in Ames, Iowa. Can they recover and bounce back in a big game against TCU? Speaking of frosty, what's it like to have a frost in the student section? We'll break that down. And plus, the college football playoff, boom or bust. We'll discuss all that. Coming up on the fastest UCF show around the kingdom.
Before we get going with all of that, Elo, let us welcome in the third member of our team. He is Adam Eaton from the Sons of UCF, keeps an eye on the clock, keeps us on our toes. Adam, hello.
Gentlemen, I expect something outrageous tonight because it's snowing in Florida, which never happens, which means something big must happen on the show tonight. So I can't wait to see what it is that you all yell about this evening.
Thank you, Adam. We'll check back soon. Frost advisory, Elo. Frost in the student section, which begs the question, as he was at that Saturday basketball game against Houston, what other UCF head coaches could pull that off? Hang out in the student section with the students, as Scott Frost did Saturday.
Well, first of all, folks, spoiler, things didn't go well in Ames, Iowa in basketball. That's why we were opening with this topic, in case you didn't know. Listen, that was fun. The Houston game, that was a cool moment to see him, because I didn't see it coming. You know, you thought, it's going to be the traditional, hey, go the courtside wave and all that. I thought that was cool. The crowd ate it up. It was fantastic. I'm not sure. I know this. I don't think there's another UCF football coach ever that would have done that other than Scott Frost. I'm not sure there's many UCF coaches, period, that would have done that. I think Greg Lovelady would have. Your buddy, he would have done that as the baseball coach. Maybe Bear might have been talked into it, but the list is very small. I'm curious what you think there.
Remember when UCF won its NIT game? Was it NIT game or the game over Illinois, right? And Johnny Dawkins.
Elite 8 NIT.
Yeah, kind of got into things with the students there, got into the action. I'd say Johnny could pull it off as well. But I mentioned it to you at Media Row there for the Houston game that Scott Frost really comes across as youthful, right? Just turned 50 years old, but just fit into that student section. And you saw it from Nebraska fans. Boy, Nebraska fans are going to follow every moment of Scott Frost's next tenure with UCF, right? They said that he looked relaxed. He looked like he was having fun. He looked like he fit in. And it was a good moment for UCF. We hadn't seen Scott in several weeks, so it was good to see him.
I think Scott fits in well here at UCF. It's almost like he's an alum, but he's not. But he's like an unofficial alum. He fits the persona, the personality. I think it's a fit. And clearly, Lincoln, Nebraska is not. Maybe he could have been on the student section for a volleyball match in Nebraska, but it's just not the same. But hey, man, you're right. He's very youthful. And again, whoever came up with that decision, props to them. That was very creative. A tough act to follow with that one. All right. So UCF basketball used the space jerseys. They're your favorites, Trace. And that brought up a question there from UCF Larry 69. Thinking one thing Gus was great at was embracing the space game. Why do you think other UCF coaches don't do the same, Trace?
I will give Gus credit. He really did lean into it. I'm sure it was marketing that urged him along, but he played along with it. And I don't know the answer to that, right? They'll wear their polo shirts and such, but I don't think any coach has leaned into it like Gus did. I can certainly see Scott Frost having fun with it during Space Game Week, during the football season. But don't you think if UCF's going to embrace this Citronaut theme, that all the coaches should get into it as much as Gus Malzahn did?
You don't even get into it. Maybe the coaches are following your lead, Trace. Maybe if you started to wear the Citronaut colors, they would follow suit. Maybe they think, hey, Trace is against it. Let's not push the envelope.
Yeah, they're determining their fashion choices based on my.
By the way, much easier to push that in football. It's a once-a-week sport, and Gus needed any positivity he can get on a football home game. The other sports, there's a lot of games going on, so I think that does play a factor into that.
Well, perhaps new volleyball head coach Matt Botsford, who was introduced at a press conference recently, maybe he'll lean into the space game in a big way. A lot of fans in the aftermath of his presser saying UCF has to do more, spend more dollars on NIL. And I had to laugh, right? Because I'm not sure how successful Botsford's going to be. I think he's a good coach and all and has had success at FGCU. But are the dollars really going to flow to volleyball because of a change in head coach? And as we have talked about over the weeks, Elo, what are you taking away from in order to fund volleyball NIL with more dollars. What are you taking away? You taking away from football? You taking away from already the meager coffers of men's basketball? What are you taking money for to put it into volleyball?
I was thinking maybe we take away partial of your salary here on the show and the Suns Live.
That he's not getting anybody.
Hey, look, they did a big press conference for him, and there was food. There was food, Trey, so that's a budget step up. Look, it's tough. That is going to be so fascinating with this whole revenue sharing and how it plays out. You know, there's a lot of mouths to feed. You know, football, men's basketball is going to get the biggest pieces of the pie. And you're right. It's funny. People always want the other sports to get revenue until football struggles. Then they're like, why are we doing this? You know, so there's always a percentage that don't want that. Volleyball, I don't know. Do you give it more than baseball? I don't think so. Do you give it more than softball? I don't think so. Get to a round of 16 and maybe we'll talk.
You're comparing it to other sports on campus. I'm talking about how it stacks up in the Big 12, right? That has several successful volleyball
you're
programs,
right about that.
and it's games of margins. We talk about this all the time. In order to get the athletes that they're going to need to compete in the Big 12 at that very high level, they're going to need to throw around dollars.
That's my point. Like sources have told me, Trace, for example, in Houston, volleyball is the number 3 priority sport. From a revenue, three ahead of women's basketball, ahead of the others, softball, baseball, number 3 behind football, men's basketball. So you're right. That's a great point you bring up. Other schools may spend more on volleyball. That's why I think Botsfield was hired, because he's used to not having a lot of resources in Fort Myers at Florida Gulf Coast, and he was able to win despite that.
Yeah, at a much different level, though.
No doubt. No, listen, I don't disagree with you, but I think that's what they believe, that he can develop players like he's done at Florida Gulf Coast, and they can get by. We shall see. The Big 12 has proven to be a very strong league at volleyball. I think they had 6-7 teams in the field of the tournament last year. Deal. Of course, no Big 12 teams football-wise making the national championship game. Ohio State, shocker, with the biggest budget, $20 million roster, defeated Notre Dame 34-23. Ryan Day still employed as we record this show, folks. So
some Ohio State fans not happy about it, probably.
Trace, give me your overall thoughts now that this first 12-team playoff is over. There's already talks about whether they could tweak it or they go into 14. What do you think of this first playoff?
I think it played out in an interesting fashion. By the way, when you have the most money, you can afford to make mistakes in your roster too, right? Because you've got so many other players on the roster. So no surprise, Ohio State had a pretty good run in the playoffs, defeating some high caliber teams. I like it. I do think there are some areas that you can tweak. You know, I'm a proponent of doing away with calling something the Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Sugar Bowl. Play these games on campus. But as we've talked about, you saw with the ticket prices in this one, Elo, you asked, how could you get from game to game one day when UCF is making this run like Ohio State did? You see the prices in Atlanta for this one? Thousands of dollars, and these games pile up. I do think they should play on campus, and maybe there's some talk about reseeding games.
How about we just play the games in December? Because I think it lost a lot of luster. It just took forever.
Have you seen ratings on this
No,
one?
and I was going to bring that up. I mean, here we are recording this late, and I mean late, folks. Tuesday night, we haven't heard a peep. That's not a good sign. Normally, if you got a big number, a number that they're excited about, they would tease it a little bit, like fast numbers. You already see the numbers for the NFL is out already. I put the over-under at 25 million for this national title game. I'll be curious if it reaches.
I think it's under, but you got 2 big brand names in that one.
That's
but
the discouraging.
It was a bit of a blowout there as the game was moving along.
Well, and there's a big topic about, like, for example, are people in the South, did they watch this game or not? I think college football in a lot of ways has become like politics, and it's a very divided sport where you have people in a certain region in the South that don't care about the Midwest or the West, and then there's a lot of people that don't care about the SEC or hate the SEC. That might be playing a role in these numbers as well, among many factors. But please, get a competent committee to seed this playoff, and my God, I mean, please get this done by January 1st. The NFL owns January.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know there was no direct NFL competition, but my brain is on NFL playoffs. Let this conclude in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. Let that be the title game.
Kevin Skarbinski said it best. Can't remember less buzz about a national title game. And these are 2 of the biggest brands in the sport. That's not good.
Well, a lot of the challenges for college sports, college football are self-inflicted, right? With player movement, the portal. There's talk, Elo, of 5 in 5 years, 5 years of eligibility doing away with all the red shirts, the medical, the red shirts. What do you think about that? Playing 5 full seasons over a 5-year span.
Somebody that spent 5+ years in college, I'm okay with it. Sometimes it takes a while. Here's what I do like about it. We can finally do away this nonsense of this 4-game. Hey, you play 4 games, but then you redshirt. Do you play him? Do you not play him? Only to see the guy transfer during the season. All that nonsense. There's no more excuses for players. There shouldn't be another player that enters the portal and quits during the middle of the season. Like we saw a handful of UCF players quit during the season. This 5 years, I think, helps fix that a little bit, Trace.
Well, let's see if they have the courage to make that change. They didn't make change about what the portal deadlines and those timeframes would be, and they have it all piled up on them in December in that problem. So we'll see if they have the courage to make this change.
There seems to be a lot of push for this, so we'll see. But you're right. Your skepticism is valid on that. Hey, just because the college football season ended Monday don't mean we don't have polls for next year already, folks. Yeah, I know you've been waiting for one. Nothing says polls like the Heartland College Sports. Way too early. Big 12 power rankings for 2025. Ooh, UCF picked 15th in the power poll, Trace. What? How dare they? What's your
How dare
answer
they? How bad is Arizona? Pick 16th after UCF changes out almost the entire roster. Chip on the shoulder. No one's expecting anything, Elo, and that's probably right where Scott Frost would like it to be. They have a lot to prove with a lot of new faces, and we really don't know much about most of them.
I 100%. Isn't that like refreshing in a way that there is no expectations? Like where they've always been middle of the pack.
How'd that work out last year with high expectations?
Correct.
So, well.
So remember, the last time there was no expectations with Scott Frost's second year, 2017. Oh, can we be better? Can we not? Next thing you know, we went undefeated. I'm not suggesting that's going to go with that. I will say this. If you told me it over under, would I take 15 or better? I think they'll be better than 15th. How much better? Who knows? But I do think they've had a good portal season to this point of getting some pieces for multi-years to help in this rebuild. But we'll see.
Remember, you've got them bowl eligible. So
darn right.
Sticking to it. They're better than 15. All right, time to bring back in Adam and our silly game. Adam, new sounder. Direct your ire if you don't like the sound.
I can't win with you people. Yeah, I can't win with you people in the sounder. But we also have a sponsor I want to talk about. Florida Football Prep is sponsoring this segment, and you can get the latest gear, custom gear, whatever you need to get yourself trained and ready to go. Go to floridafootballprep.com. They have everything you need. They also do conditioned football. So if you need a good broken in football, they have you there. And by the way, they have a podcast called The Quarterback Room available on all your major podcast players. Again, floridafootballprep.com is where you can find them. All right, gentlemen, here's the question. Elo, I'll start with you with a tip of the cap to a good friend of the program, Maury Povich, who just turned 86 recently. Elo, we're gonna play a game of lie detector. You tell me if the statement I give you, if you think the person was lying or telling the truth. Okay, here you go. Kelvin Sampson said that the UCF student section, the crowd, was the best he'd seen all season. Is Kelvin Sampson lying, or is he telling us the truth?
Yeah, he's telling the truth. He hasn't had it's not going to be truthful in about a few weeks there when he starts playing Iowa State and company. But yeah, I think that's truthful compared to the teams he's played on the road this year, like Kansas State's having a bad year. Yeah, I thought the student section was fantastic against Houston.
Yeah, I mean, a good student section. They hadn't played many teams in conference on the road yet. I think Elo's right when they travel around a little bit more. Not to take away anything from the atmosphere. Students have been packing it out. So kudos to the students. I believe Coach Sampson.
All right, next one starts with you, Trace. You said earlier in the show that Scott Frost is like an unofficial alum of UCF. Who else do you consider an unofficial? Oh, there's Elo. Okay, correction. Who else do you consider an unofficial alum of UCF?
We're talking about guys that maybe didn't graduate that are in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. I consider Blake Bortles an unofficial alum.
I think he went back. I'll have to fact check that.
Did he go back?
I
don't know. Scott Frost certainly seems like one, but as coaches are longer at the program, then I do consider them more a part of the program long term. So why not Johnny Dawkins as well?
Ooh, that's pretty interesting there with that answer. I was not expecting that.
He might disagree considering his alma mater.
Yeah, Duke's pretty good academic school there. I think if Ball Malone keeps getting this success, right? UCF people don't, Pacific's not an easy school to remember. I think that's a good one. How about some of the coaches that Scott Frost brought back? that didn't go to UCF but have come here for the second time around. Maybe they're an unofficial alum too if they do a good job. Maybe let's go with that.
All right, the wrap-up question for you, Elo. It is allegedly snowing in parts of Florida. It will snow in more parts of Florida.
Allegedly.
So where are you at with snow? Like, what's your definition of, are you a fan of snow or no fan of snow? Where do you land on snow?
I'm a fan. I've only seen it once in my life when I was with softball in 2016 when we went to Storrs, Connecticut, and we got snowed out 2 of the 3 games. We got to see snow. The players went outside the hotel and started playing snow, fights and playing snowball. So I'm all for it once in a while because I don't see it often.
Highly overrated. Visiting family in Denver. I'm not a fan of the cold. It looks nice when it's falling. And when you have to shovel it and deal with it, it's a big mess. So that's why I live in Florida, and I don't want to see any snow any more than I have to.
Thrown a snowball at anybody, Trace?
I have, and I have been hit. And depending on how packed it is, it's like a rock. So not a fan. Thank you.
Stay for Adam. Kingdom overtime. We'll find out where Trace got hit.
Thank you, Adam. All right, Elo, you mentioned it off the top. You beat Iowa State. You probably lead around the kingdom, but when the Knights give up 108 points and lose at number 3 Iowa State, you fall a little bit down the rundown. Knights, all kinds of problems in Ames, 19 turnovers, and the list goes on. No match for Iowa State. And you knew that, Elo. We talked about it as soon as Iowa State lost to West Virginia over the weekend. You knew it was going to be tough for UCF.
Yeah, we need to stop playing teams that are coming off losses to West Virginia. It's not been very kind to us, and that's what happened here with Iowa State. Listen, you have the combination. I mean, what a brutal stretch. You're playing Houston and Iowa State back-to-back, Trace. Think about that. What would be the football equivalent of that? That would be like if UCF was playing, Ohio State and Penn State back-to-back? I mean,
pretty much.
Right? Like, it's just insane. And I just wondered, you play that emotional game against Houston, Iowa State coming off a loss at West Virginia, Iowa State, the number 1 offense in the Big 12, 21st in the country, averaging 83 against a defense that has struggled. And boy, they lit up UCF, scoring 108. It's the 8th most points allowed for a UCF basketball team in the history of the program, the most since, I think, 2010 in the Marshall triple overtime game. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's what I've been hearing. So rough stretch. That there's a reason why Iowa State started as a 17.5-point favorite, Trace, in this game. What I don't understand is how the heck did the number get down to 15.5? Who's picking UCF? Why do people keep betting on UCF in all these sporting events, Trace? Can we stop that, please?
Didn't have a chance to research this one, Elo, but UCF's 83 points, if they had scored that in games last year, I think they would have won a lot of those games. Remember beating BYU like 63-58 or losing 63-58. They played a lot of low-scoring, tight games. Here they're putting up 83 and they lose by 25.
Shot the ball well from 3. They shot the ball well from 3.
But Iowa State shot well from everywhere, right? Yeah. They've got to play better defense, Elo, or you're going to have a tough road. When they play defense, as we saw against Houston, you can make that game much more competitive. And that is not a Johnny Dawkins team that you expect defensively.
No, and they're going to have to play better if they want to make the NCAA tournament. And that is the question now, is how do things look for this team as far as making the NCAA tournament? Trace, you said it on an Around the Kingdom you guaranteed it. They would make the tournament. That was your bold prediction. How are you feeling about it?
I felt better in their loss to Houston than I did in their loss to Iowa State. 10-10. That's my marker where I think they can get in there. I think if it's less than that, and I had to laugh, by the way, Elo, when I said it's too early for bracketology. And you're like, aren't you the guy that talks about bowl projections after spring football? It's still within their control. I do think the TCU game on Saturday with Kansas just beyond that, and that's a brutal stretch, right? Houston, Iowa State, Kansas. You got to get that TCU win. They're now 3-4 in the Big 12, Elo, but quality losses, that's important.
Now you know what it's like as a power forward. I remember you used to mock that all the time. Now it's not so mocking anymore. So a lot of the bracketologists prior to the Iowa State game had UCF as a last 4 in. Joe Lenardi, Jerry Palm.
That's fair, don't you think?
Yeah. I do. I think UCF's net ranking, to be honest, is kind of Bush League. They've beaten Texas A&M. They've beaten Texas Tech on the road. They've beaten Arizona State on the road. They have a pretty decent resume. The problem is that some of the metrics don't like them because they haven't blown teams out that maybe they're supposed to. And then certainly getting blown out by 51 to Kansas didn't help, or 25 against Iowa State. My guess is after this game, many of those bracketologists will drop them to the first 4 out. But it's a marathon. You break a great point. As much as you would have liked the Iowa State game, that was a long shot. In this brutal stretch that you've had Houston, Iowa State, TCU, Kansas, the must-win, the big game is TCU, who, by the way, just beat Baylor at Baylor. So this is a big bubble game, swing game. You win this game, you're 4-4. You're going to probably lose to Kansas, but you would have taken 4-5 after this stretch. And the last 11 games is, if there's such a thing as a manageable schedule in the Big 12, they have it to some extent. But if you lose to TCU, now you're digging yourself a hole. Probably going to be 3-6 with that's going to be tough to get out of. So this Saturday, it's a big game.
Yeah, 4-4, maybe 4-5 with a loss at Kansas does look a lot different than 3-6. I still think 10, and if you can't hit 10 in regular season, puts more pressure on them in the Big 12 tournament to pick up 1, maybe 2 wins. A long season. You said it, a marathon, Elo. All right, it was a tough loss Saturday at home. They had Houston, right? They just had to close out. Couldn't close out the game. Painful loss, especially knowing that you were going to have to go on the road to Iowa State. That was one for the taking against a very talented Houston team that we're going to see play well into March.
Yes, and that's why I think it's one of the most gut-wrenching. I think, to me, it's the most gut-wrenching regular season loss, and that's impressive considering we had one earlier in the year against LSU where you blew a big lead and lose in triple overtime. But the reason why I think this was big, if you get one stop right there in that game, you win that game, we're talking about clearly in the tournament at that point. That's a huge resume win. I mean, I remember the crowd starting to settle in. They're about to storm the court. They got all the security. And then give Houston credit. They called a nice design play to Roberts, and Mustafa, being a freshman, reaches in, tries for the steal. Why? Don't need that. That allowed Roberts to get in good position and drive to the hole for the basket. Crushing loss. My concern, Trace, I hope we're not talking on Selection Sunday wondering if this is the difference between getting in and being left out.
And I do think Coach Sampson said something interesting, that UCF's going to have to win some important games on the road. And he gave them credit for wins at Texas Tech, right? That they would need to win some games on the road. So it didn't happen at Iowa State. Going to be a lot of other road games that UCF is going to have an opportunity. Let me ask you, go back to bracketology. They hang on and beat LSU. Where do you think they are? Do you think that was a significant impact on that last 4 in, last 4 out?
I mean, it helps. It would have been a quad 2 win, so that helps your resume. It doesn't hurt them as bad because it's not a bad loss. You want to avoid quad 3 losses and definitely quad 4. The good news for UCF, they only have 2 quad 3 games left as of now. But certainly, if you win that LSU game, you're probably still in the pretty good. You're probably in the tournament with a little more room for error, but it's not as significant. But certainly, if you end up being a first 4 out come Selection Sunday, you'll be thinking about that game and definitely this Houston game. But despite that, isn't it fun? We're talking postseason, something that we didn't do in football this past year, which is actually an easier sport to get to postseason. Didn't even qualify for a bowl. Trace, we go into the Big 12 thinking men's basketball would be in trouble in the Big 12 and that football could have success, yet it feels like it's been the other way around. Do you believe that UCF basketball has outperformed UCF football so far in the Big 12?
Elo, not only so far this season, I'd go over the course of 2 seasons in the Big 12. Men's basketball has overachieved. Football has underachieved, and significantly different budgets, as we have talked about, resources going to football. They should be doing better. They haven't been doing better. And men's basketball is competitive. Games like that Kansas one notwithstanding, if you look over the season and a half or thereabouts of Big 12 play for the Knights, they're in a lot of these games. They're competitive. They go to the wire.
I agree, which is amazing. I mean, we're talking about revenue sharing and football maybe getting 85, 90% or of the pie throughout the country. Basketball maybe 10%. What do you think the ratio has been in UCF? Like 99-1 in favor of football?
It sure feels like it.
Right? And yet, UCF, right, they got a marquee win against Kansas. They got a marquee win at Texas Tech this year. Football has finished near the bottom this year in the Big 12. I mean, I don't have the numbers, but I'm pretty sure men's basketball has a better Big 12 win percentage than football. Who would have predicted that? If I would have told you about a year and a half ago, would you have believed me if I said that?
No, absolutely not, Elo. Absolutely not. I think men's basketball continues to overachieve. Football underachieves. Let's talk Big 12. Houston, we saw what they look like in person on Saturday, top of the heap. And you mentioned some winnable games on the schedule favor the Knights, but we thought going in, games like West Virginia would be easier for UCF to win. So a couple of teams surprising as we hit that quarter pole.
Yeah, West Virginia has done a heck of a job. DeVries, the head coach, without his son, who's out with a shoulder injury, but they got this player named Small, who is right now maybe the front runner for Big 12 Player of the Year. I think UCF, by the way, just saw the best team in the Big 12 in Iowa State. For those out there, they're complaining about why they can't stop. I mean, just tip your cap to the opponent. Sometimes they're pretty good. There's a reason why Iowa State's a Final Four contender. I think there's a separation. I think it's Iowa State, Houston, Kansas. Those are your top three in the Big 12. After that, Baylor's struggling a little bit, Trace, losing at home to TCU.
Yeah,
that's a surprise there. They're not performing at the highest of levels. Cincinnati was hyped by a lot of people, lost on Tuesday night to Texas Tech, so they're struggling. So to me, the Big 12, I think Texas Tech might be the fifth best team in the Big 12 with Baylor. And then I think it's a big mess to figure out who else can make the field. UCF's in that conversation. I think West Virginia's in the field with their quality wins. They might be them. But Baylor's got to figure some things out. Arizona, which Arizona team shows up on a nightly basis is interesting. It's just an interesting Big 12. There's some bottom teams that have some questions. Kansas State has been the UCF football version in college basketball. Their best player, Jordan Crawford, transferred to Kansas State's making $2 million in NIL, Trace, and they're at the bottom of the Big 12. Pretty stunning. Unbelievable.
All right. Prop time, Mila. What do you got?
Well, UCF, we mentioned not so well hot on the road. I'm going to pass the TCU game on. So I'm going to go ahead to Lawrence next weekend. We know it didn't go well when Kansas came here, Trace. So I'm going to give you the over-under. Can UCF keep it under 25 points against Kansas next week?
Yes.
Confident?
We're not going to win that game, I don't think. I'm pretty confident on the 25.
What about 20?
A little less confident, but the line will be double digits. We can agree on that, right on the road.
Are you kidding? Yeah, I think it'll be. All right, that's another bonus pick. Do you think the spread will be high, 20 or less or more? The points
less. It won't be 20. That was an anomaly, that game here. Kansas is better. They'll be favored, but I don't think it'll be more than 20, less than 20, 15, 16, kind of similar to the Iowa State range.
All right, that's our prop bet there. And then for TCU, we'll over under 8,500 fans.
Over 4 o'clock. I like that time slot better than noon. So over. Students will pack things out. Game within the game, Elo. Things tightening up. 19 points that I have. Adam's at 18. You're at 16. And Andrew Trylko at 13. He had Darius Johnson as the number 1 pick in the game at Iowa State. Season to date, by the way, on points, my combination of Darius, even though he left with injury, Mustafa and Debo, 160 total points this season, Elo. Your combo of Keyshawn Hall and the Williams, Benny, and Mikey, 153. And Adam, Ivy, Curry, Sellers, Taylor, 111 points.
Ouch.
Let's bring back in Adam. It's always the segue.
Yeah,
you bring up the rear in the season points. And hey, what do we get right? What do we get wrong?
All right, I submit to you that Mike Kruzek may sit in the student section. I feel like sleeveless shirt, you may get Mike Kruzek with the students. You guys mentioned Matt Botsford. We didn't talk about his record, 236-73 in 11 years at FGCU. They've made the postseason 4 times, a 76% winning percentage. The internet tells me Blake Bortles did not graduate from UCF, so I don't think he went back there. Elo, you were correct. UCF and Marshall 2010, 121-115 was the final score. It was an overtime game, though. Trace, I did some quick math. If UCF scored the amount of points they scored tonight, they would have picked up 11 additional wins last season.
11!
If they had scored in that 83-point range. You mentioned Darius Johnson. Johnny Dawkins said postgame he banged knees, nothing serious, and that he wants to take him out to get him some rest. Elo, Javon Smalls, who you're looking for, West Virginia, leading the conference in scoring at 19.8 points a game. Keyshawn Hall, 3rd in scoring, by the way, at 16.9 points a game.
11 games. One more thing before we go, Elo. Hey, I know this is on your calendar. Check out UCF softball at FanFest on Sunday. Open practice from 10:30 in the morning till 1, and then meet the team from 1:30 to 3:30. You'll be out there at the UCF softball complex, no doubt. You also get a chance to meet the one,
I
the
get
only
to meet
Eric
the team.
Lopez. Look for new episodes midweek every week on the Sons of UCF YouTube channel and on the Sons podcast feed, where you'll also find Around the Kingdom Overtime, which we record after this show. For Eric Lopez and Adam Eaton, I'm Trace Trylko. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this week's Around the Kingdom.